You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Appreciate you joining me here today on our Weight Loss and Wellness Wednesday. You'll see how today's topic on how to boost your digestion while decreasing bloating actually does help both wellness and weight loss across the board. And believe it or not, the better your digestion, the more improved chances for longevity. And we've known that, we've seen that. Ayurvedic medicine has been teaching that for years, same with Chinese medicine. And I'll show you how the two are intimately linked together, and that one of the basis, the foundation for all good health is improving the digestive system. It's always wise as a naturopathic doctor and as health practitioners in general, if there's an issue with the body, we always have to ask first and foremost, is there anything wrong with the digestive system? Now, there may not be, okay? That's a possibility. But we ask that question first. And if there's not, then we can move on to viruses and the immune system and genetics and all those other things. Like, that's all great. We should look at all of those things. But the truth is, if your digestive system is not functioning properly, here's what's happening. You're allowing bacteria from the environment, from foods, things like that, to pass undigested right into your intestines. That inflames the intestines. It causes an immune-based reaction. The other thing we want to look at as well is that if you have any type of intestinal permeability, and you're eating these saturated fats and you're eating these proteins and they're moving through the gut wall, because remember, the gut wall is a single cell. It's one cell, but it's supposed to stay nice and tight and closed. Only allow what our body needs to go in and keep all the other stuff out, and that just gets then removed through the body and into the stool. But here's the issue, is that because of alcohol and NSAIDs like Advil and ibuprofen type drugs, birth control, stress, improper food combining, fried foods, all of these things, right? All of these things, even lectins, believe it or not, I mentioned that right on a previous show. That was just yesterday. Should you be following a low lectin diet? Check out that show if you didn't. That was episode 781. Today's show is 782. All the show notes, all the links will be at stephencabral.com/782. So here's the interesting thing though. Any one of these things can damage our gut. And over a lifetime, 10 years, 20 years, or if you're like me, when I was growing up, I was taking a Z-Pak. I was taking amoxicillin for just a common cold for the sniffles, and it was too bad. My doctor meant well. Our pediatrician meant well. He didn't mean to cause all these immune-based issues with me. Same with my dermatologist when they put me on 3,000 capsules of amoxicillin. I mean, that makes zero sense, but unfortunately, they still do it to this day for a lot of people. So what happens though is when you take that many antibiotics, it wipes out a lot of the good bacteria in your gut, and it opens up the cell walls in the gut lining that it causes increased intestinal permeability or a leaky gut. When that happens, your own bacteria, as well as bacteria that you're starting to grow in there from other foods that come in, or you might have an overgrowth of E. coli or C. diff or Klebsiella, or all these different types of things in your gut. Well, those bacteria can then move into your bloodstream. They were never supposed to see the bloodstream ever. That causes immune-based reaction. Now we have all these different autoimmune-based processes, or at the very least, massive inflammation within the body. So here's the thing though, we can prevent a lot of this by listening to Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine as well, all the different types of medicine, Taoist medicine, Greek medicine, every type of medicine, honestly. And here's why. They said, I'm just going to quote Ayurveda, is that if you have weak agni, if you have weak digestion, if you have this kapha-based condition in the stomach, the cold stomach, not a lot of heat in the stomach, well then here's what it means, is that you're not going to be able to properly break down food at the beginning of the digestive process. If you do not properly break down food, what happens is this. The food begins to ferment in the stomach. When that happens, bacteria is created, okay? Larger amounts of bacteria. Here's why. Yes, we're all supposed to chew the food very well in our mouth, but our stomach is supposed to produce a lot of acid. A lot of people are confused by this because we're on PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, or we're on acid blockers. But the problem is this. If you do not have enough acid in your stomach, you can allow parasites and bacteria and other things to move through into your intestines unabated because they were supposed to die. They're supposed to be killed, this bacteria, in your low stomach acid, somewhere around a 2 or 3 pH. But if you're not producing stomach acid properly, the food can also sit there and ferment, especially proteins. When these things putrefy, you get bloated because here's why. Think about it. You put the food into your stomach's supposed to heat it up. It's supposed to, well, first you use the enzymes from breaking open your own cells, so the cells of the food, by chewing with your teeth. And then the mastication of the teeth and then the saliva mixes with that food if we're doing things properly, right? And then salivary amylase, which is an amylase that breaks down starches, or enzyme that breaks down starches, is released from our saliva. Okay, then we swallow it into our stomach. Now our stomach is going to start to churn and break down the actual food over a period of a half hour to maybe 2.5 or 3 hours, depending on how heavy the meal was. So here's what's supposed to happen though. After about a half hour of eating, we get signals, okay? We get signals actually from the nerve endings in the stomach telling us, okay, we're starting to get full. About 20 minutes later or so, let's start producing hydrochloric acid in the stomach. This is normal. This is supposed to happen. So another thing is it's called pepsin. And these are two heat-producing digestive, we'll call them enzymes for right now, even though it's acid-based, okay? Papain's to break down the proteins, but that's what most acids are meant to do. And that's because, think about it. I always give this example in my practice. If you were to take, let's just say, a piece of fish, okay? Let's drop that piece of fish, raw fish, in water. If you looked at it the next day, it would just be bloated. It would be all puffy and just kind of like expanded in the water. But if you drop that same fish into, let's say, Bragg's apple cider vinegar, it would actually cook the fish. The next day, you would see a piece of cooked fish. And the reason you would see that is because apple cider vinegar, or vinegar in general, is very acid-based. The same is true if you drop that fish into lemon and lime, just some lime, right? Or I should say lemon or citrus. That's a form of cooking ceviche or ceviche. And that also cooks the fish without even having to cook it on a open flame or on a pan or anything like that, right? Because what we're looking for is heat. And low acid-based items produce heat. Well, our stomach is naturally supposed to do that if everything's working well. I'll do a separate show on why people get acid reflux, because a lot of the time it has nothing to do with the acid produced in the stomach. The stomach should be producing lots of acid in the stomach. What shouldn't be happening is it should not be coming up the esophagus, right? It should not be coming up past that lower esophageal sphincter, which is a muscle that keeps acid in the stomach and it keeps your esophagus safe. So here's the thing. I'm just going to give a quick aside. You're taking PPIs, you're taking any of these things, they're shutting down a lot of the acids. Well, here's the problem. You can still end up with Barrett's esophageal-based issues later in life, even if you shut down the acid. And the reason is that lower esophageal sphincter, that muscle, no longer has to stay closed. And if it doesn't have to stay closed because it stays closed in the presence of high acid, well, here's the deal. Enzymes can start to move their way up that esophagus as well. They can cause destruction of the esophagus at the same rate. They can just lead to longer-term health damage as well. So here's the problem. I understand you need to take the acid blocker right now if you need to, but the problem is it says right on those drugs, do not use for more than 2 weeks, meaning like, in my opinion, don't use them at all unless something really bad is happening. Okay, use in the short term, but you have to figure out why the acid reflux in the first place. Today's episode should hopefully be able to not give you the meaning like you can test for the answer. Why don't I do that now? Okay, here's the reason why some people don't have the best digestive strength in the stomach. They might have H. pylori. They might have Clostridium difficile that's made its way up into the stomach. H. pylori is a bacteria in the stomach. It's going to actually start to eat hydrogen, or it's going to start to eat part of the molecules, the enzymes needed for hydrochloric acid. Okay, so that's really, really important to look at as well. And then one more thing I would say is Candida, always the same thing. The other part is just low stomach acid, okay? Low stomach acid from taking plenty of antibiotics, from being overly stressed, from being any of these things where you're not in the parasympathetic nervous system. Well, what can we do about this? Well, can you test for those? Yes. You can do a stool test to test for H. pylori, E. coli overgrowth, parasites, any number of things. Okay, you can test for that. You can use an organic acids test to test for Candida, Clostridium difficile, and other fungal yeast-based markers as well. Well, those are the two main ones. That's what I would do. That's absolutely what I would do. And then here's what else we can do, though, because I'm going to teach you today how to boost your digestion. This is really, really important, okay? Because I don't recommend things like hydrochloric acid or betaine HCl right out of the gates for people unless they've done the stool test to confirm they don't have H. pylori. Because if you give someone betaine HCl and they have H. pylori or they have an ulcer, you're going to cause even more problems. So I always use, well, why don't I give you today exactly what I do? All right, so here's the deal. If you're someone that experiences bloating 20 minutes, 30 minutes starting after a meal, or it might even be an hour after that meal, what we're looking at is the food still in the stomach. So that means there's improper digestion. Either it was poor food combining, it was just too large of a meal for your stomach. But even if it was a small meal and it caused that, well, simply weak digestion, not enough digestive strength, probably not enough natural stomach acid. So what we want to do is we want to boost that, all right? I especially see this issue with a lot of people eating a heavy protein-based diet, especially meats and, even fish can do it for sure. But that's just because protein's the hardest thing to break down. So you need a good amount of stomach acid. Just the example I gave you earlier of the fish, you need that to really break those things down. But you still need acid to break down the fibers and foods, those types of things as well, because the other enzymes aren't going to get there until we get to the intestines as well, until pancreatic enzymes are released and bile's released as well to help emulsify certain fats, okay? But it's not just the animal proteins, it's not just the fish. This can happen with plant proteins as well, because again, plant proteins made up of amino acids, those amino acids, they take some heat to cleave them, to break them off and to break them into smaller amino acids that our body can then use in the intestines to be able to absorb and build back up our body, because protein is obviously one of the 3 macronutrients that our body needs to rebuild itself, right? It needs carbs, it needs fats, and it needs proteins, right? So it needs smaller fatty acids from the fats, it needs sugars from all the carbohydrates, and it needs amino acids from the proteins. Very, very important. So if you feel like your digestion's weak, if you feel bloated after a meal, if you have some sluggishness, or maybe you just have some brain fog, or you feel a little tired after a meal, or you start to get maybe a little dull headache, or any of these things, think about all that blood being moved to your stomach. Let's try to give your body a little bit of help. So here's what I learned, especially being overseas, is that almost every culture, literally almost every culture, except let's call it like the so-called modernized or like Western-based cultures, every other culture that I was at, whether I was in like Middle Eastern-based dishes or in India or in China, a lot of Asian-based cultures, Thai-based cultures, what they do is they always serve a digestive strengthener with the meal. And that's what I want to go over today. Because these things are essentially, they're not free, right? You still have to buy them, but they're perfect to not only for the palate, for the taste, but they complement the meal. So I just love to give this example. When I was in China especially, but this is all over the world, of course, because people eat sushi all over the world. But if you're eating raw fish, it was always known in both Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine, every type of medicine, right? All the Eastern-based varieties, that's a cold, damp food. What do I mean by that? It's that, well, just like it sounds, it's a cold, damp food. And now your stomach is supposed to have a lot of heat to it. So how do you offset a cold, damp food? Well, with heat and dryness. Wasabi was always one of those things that was served traditionally, and still is today. If you go to a good sushi restaurant, they will give you wasabi. They'll give you some type of horseradish or even some fermented or pickled ginger, which is going to have a lot of spice to it. So you're adding, ginger is dry and heating, okay? Wasabi, dry and heating. That offsets the cold dampness of the fish. A lot of people have difficulty digesting fish. I wouldn't say I'm the best at digesting fish myself. Okay, I have more of that kapha stomach. I do have a good amount of kapha in my genotype and my phenotype as well. Meaning like I lean towards kapha. If I start to try to put on a little bit of muscle, a little bit of weight, especially during the wintertime, just in general, my kapha goes quite high. The mucus in my body can get quite high. My digestion can get sluggish, although it's like it just flips the switch in the spring and summer. My digestion becomes so robust. So then I can't even do a lot of these ginger teas. It's funny because I can do ginger tea in the winter, but I can't do it in late spring and summer. It will give me acid reflux. So you can look at these things based on your body, even based on the seasons, and all of these things will make sense for you in the future, right? We all kind of walk the tightrope of figuring things out for ourselves. And I've just been doing this so long, I'm quite in tune with my body. I know that you're going to get there as well. So the wasabi is just one example, but that wasabi is going to bring heat to the stomach. So it's going to move, it's going to kill the bacteria for sure in the fish. Really important, right? Because fish, especially sushi, could carry parasites. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to make sure there's a lot of acid in the stomach to kill any of that bacteria or parasites. Okay. Well, when I was overseas, I chose not to eat a lot of these different types of food so that I wouldn't get sick. Because if I got sick, what happened was I would be out, right? I would be out of my internships, my residencies over there. And this was a one-shot deal. I couldn't just go back there next week. So I had to keep myself really, really healthy. So, I mean, over there, I will tell you what I did. Why don't I share that with you at the end of the show? But I would always use these heating-based products, peppers and things like that. The ginger I gave away, fermented ginger, really, really popular product. And of course, ginger tea. Ginger tea is used all around the world as something that settles the digestion. In the United States, we use like ginger ale, but no, it's ginger tea that's the real deal, right? Or just ginger, shaved ginger or ginger powder. Any of those things as a spice would work really, really well. When I was in India, liberal amounts of spices. I mean, the amount of spices that we used, everything had different spices, whether it was cardamom and just all these different, just amazing, amazing spices. And a lot of it was hot too. There was heat, there was peppers, there was all sorts of different things. Ayurveda is famous for all these different concoctions. For the kapha body type, one of the things that we use specifically is a product called Trikatu. And Trikatu is literally black pepper. It's this long pepper. There's other peppers in there, but it just works for bringing a lot of heat to that stomach. When do you take these typically? When are you taking all of these different things? Well, I want to add a few more, but typically you're taking these right before the meal, okay, 5 or 10 minutes before to wake up the digestive system, or for people with sensitive stomachs. Remember, these are going to be acid-based and they're going to be heating. So for the most part, what we do is we take them about halfway through the meal. Okay, that's when I usually recommend most people take their nutritional supplements, their pills, their capsules, but also their heating-based foods. Now you can take it, of course, along with the food as you're eating it, but let's just say you're just saying, okay, when should I have my ginger tea? Well, start sipping on it through the meal. But if you're going to be doing something like I mentioned next, okay, this next thing. In Europe, my wife actually introduced me to these many, many years ago. She enjoyed drinking them. I never drank them growing up, but she always drank them as a kid, and they're called bitters, okay? So she went over to Europe far before I ever did. She went over, I think, when she was like 12 years old to Italy to see some cousins, relatives, friends, all that. And I think that's when she initially started drinking them when she came back. Well, all they are herbal-based decoctions or herbal-based remedies. And essentially, herbs usually extracted with alcohol to get the extract from it. That's how most extracts are done. But you can also get some that are done strictly in the sun, meaning like they put them in a water and they let the sunlight extract the herbs right into that. Well, what are some of the most popular bitters out there that you could experiment with for yourself? Gentian is one of the most famous. That's always the one that I'm pointing people towards. Like if you're going to try a bitter, gentian is one of the most famous, easily in the top 5 bitters. You'll see a few that are made with orange peel or cinnamon, any type of spice, heating spice especially, that's going to bring more heat to the stomach. So what do? Well, they settle the stomach, but in also the case of something like gentian is that it also allows for better bile production and it allows for a little bit more liver detoxification. Well, how is this possible, you might ask? Well, here's the deal. If your body produces more stomach acid in a good way, remember, in a good way, not overproduces, so you're literally getting acid reflux, okay? But again, acid reflux a lot of times is from bacterial overgrowth as well. That's pushing, it's literally forcing up the bacteria up to your esophagus. That's a whole different story we'll talk about on another show. But by using the bitters and by using these heating-based things, your body then knows, okay? The liver, the gallbladder, they know that the body must drop more bile into the duodenum, that first part of the small intestine. So as the food moves through the stomach, it moves through the gastric valve into that first part of the small intestine, right on that right side, okay? What happens then is that we need something alkaline to meet all of this acid. Remember, your body has all this figured out. You don't need to know how it works. You just need to support it, okay? So the bile drops down. It's very alkaline. It's cooling, right? So if you have hot acid coming into the intestines, what do you need? Well, you need something cooling, and that's where the bile comes in. That helps basically cause this eruption, like from science class. I always draw out the example in my private practice of you put apple cider vinegar in a beaker, right? A glass chemistry beaker. And then you add baking soda to that apple cider vinegar. What do you get? You get that volcanic explosion, that eruption that comes up. Well, that's what's happening. It's breaking open all these food particles, especially fats. And it's allowing you to now make it easier for your intestines not to have all this stuff fermenting in them. The other thing is your pancreas is bringing enzymes to the area as well to break down foods, your fats, your carbohydrates, and your proteins. Again, your body has this figured out. What happens is once it goes wrong, well, that's when we start to fall into issues, right? So those are some of the things, meaning like we have spices, especially like Thai food. We've got nice chili peppers. We have bitters in Europe. We've got all the Indian-based spices and the curries that are great. We have ginger that's used in many, many cultures. In the US, kind of when in Europe, Europe has the bitters, but a lot of times the only thing that we have is a little black coffee after a meal or an espresso after a meal. Well, how does that work? Same principle. Acid, heating, hot for the stomach helps to better break down food, and it helps to speed up the motility through the stomach, okay? So that it doesn't allow the food to just sit there and ferment. Then that allows then for better broken down food, which means it won't sit there and rot in your intestines, which is not what you want because that creates more bacterial overgrowth. So all of these things work in unison, meaning like the intestines get better peristaltic movement to remove all of these things from your intestines, right? At a much faster fashion. So there's no, well, one, there's no diarrhea. And the second is there's no constipation because it's a nice normal movement. So it improves not only the stomach motility, but also the bowels, right? The intestinal motility as well. Everything is functioning exactly as it should. This is why when someone's doing our parasite protocol or our candida and bacterial overgrowth protocol or any protocols at all, what we want them to do is make sure that they have enough strength of digestion, enough agni, right? Agni doesn't allow ama to get created in the body. And ama is an Ayurvedic term for toxins. Believe it or not, probably the majority of toxins we have coming into our body every day are coming in through food. Yes, they're coming in through the water we drink and all the chemicals as well. I understand that. But a lot of what happens is that our body's not properly breaking down food. And so we're not digesting, we're not getting enough of the nutrients we need. And it sits there for too long, causing bacterial overgrowth or toxins in the body. It also uses a tremendous amount of energy. If you're tired after a meal, well, you might have ate a food you're sensitive to, or you just might be taking so much energy to break down all that food. What you can do is use some of the bitters that I just talked about today. You can use a little bit of the hot ginger tea with a meal. You could do about 3 or 4 ounces of water, add another 2 ounces of apple cider vinegar, squeeze a lemon right in there. That would work great as well. That's basically a homemade bitter that you could do right there, the apple cider vinegar. It's acid-based going into the stomach. It will break down a lot of that food. And all of these things work. Again, like you want to try to stay away from a lot of the caffeinated beverages, but if it's earlier in the day, or let's say you're at brunch earlier, well, you could have a small cup of black coffee as long as you don't have a tendency towards high cortisol. That's why, you have to test for all these things because you can't be drinking caffeine if your body's in a fight or flight based position. You're only going to increase anxiety. You're going to increase more acid reflux. You're going to increase all the things you don't want if you're drinking coffee and you're getting caffeine if you're someone who pushes more towards that fight or flight based response. So, I'll link up the tests. You're always welcome to do them. But what can most people do? Well, most people really can do a ginger tea. That works for sure. A lot of people can do a bitter. They're an acquired taste, but people can certainly try bitters. I'll link them up in the show notes today. Again, just go to stephencabral.com/782. I'll try to find a company that I like and forward you over that link as well. I'll put that there. The daily digestive enzyme, that's something that every single person uses in our practice for approximately the first 8 to 12 weeks. And that's the minimum because then you can continue on to use it. The daily digestive enzyme actually contains all the enzymes to break down proteins, fats, and carbs, but it also contains bromelain that I've talked about before as one of my super nutrients of the week on a Friday review because bromelain comes from the core of a pineapple and it helps to break down proteins. Same with papain, which is coming from mainly papaya. But you're not going to get that from the flesh of papaya. You really need to be getting the seeds, which are very, very bitter if you've ever tasted the seeds of a papaya. Very, very bitter. Very, very good for you. And you can have it with the flesh of the papaya as well. But those were some of the only things that we served in clinics actually overseas, is we served a little pineapple for people who wanted that sweetness after their meal. But again, it doesn't come from really the flesh of the pineapple. It comes from the core. Now, could you juice the core of a pineapple? Absolutely. If you juice the core of a pineapple, well, you can mix that also with a little, like, let's just say San Pellegrino at a meal. That would make a nice little digestive bitter on your own as well. So all sorts of things to do. A lot of times I just like to give people the easy thing, which is simply doing the daily digestive enzyme before a meal. And then in the future, if you found out you didn't have H. pylori, an easy way to increase that stomach acid is with betaine HCl and potentially with a little bit of ox bile or bile used away from the meals. I don't do that with the meal. I do that away from the meals. And that's a whole protocol right there that you're welcome to do. If I use betaine HCl and bile in my practice, it's typically only maybe for 6 weeks to 12 weeks maximum. And then we wean off that. We stay on the daily digestive enzyme as long as needed or as long as desired. And then we're using things such as any of these herbal-based teas, or we're using bitters. We're using things like wasabi with a meal, maybe a little horseradish if you like it, an apple cider vinegar drink. Any of the things. But just remember, so my job is to teach you today, and hopefully you took from this, that you need to make your stomach acid during a meal. You need to heat up the stomach to kill the bacteria in the food, but also to break it down faster so that it doesn't sit in your stomach and start to ferment and literally rot. When that happens, it causes gas. It blows up your stomach like a balloon, which is why you feel the pressure. That's the pressure of your stomach expanding because of the gas trapped in it from the food that's literally fermenting and rotting in your stomach. And again, this can happen for many, many different reasons, but I gave you some of those reasons today. No matter what, using my suggestions today, whether it's the daily digestive enzyme or any of the food-based treatments, any of those things will help to speed up that motility. Highly recommend it. Give it a shot. You have pretty much nothing to lose. Hopefully this was helpful. Let me know if I left anything out, if I could have added anything, if I can answer any additional questions. I'm always happy to do that. Check in on Instagram. Just go to Instagram.com. Well, just Instagram on your app, not online. And just go to Stephen Cabral. Feel free to let me know how you like today's show and offer any suggestions. I'm always happy to do follow-up shows as well. And again, if this was helpful, please do feel free to share it with anyone you believe it could serve. Take care, everyone. Are you ready to heal yourself and then go on to heal others? If so, the Integrative Health Practitioner Institute can help you discover proven functional medicine protocols that blend the best of 7 different healing disciplines from around the world. I personally share with you the exact handouts and protocols I use in my private practice that enable people to get well, lose the weight, and live longer, stronger. I want to pass this information on to the next generation of health coaches, and that is exactly why I created IHP. We are the future of the health coaching industry, and the skills and knowledge you will learn will make you an in-demand certified health coach anywhere in the world. Although we have many medical professionals taking the IHP certifications, no experience is necessary, and half our members have no previous health certifications. At the Integrative Health Practitioner Institute, our motto is a health coach in every home. Our goal is that you take this knowledge and then share it with family, friends, loved ones, your community, or in a practice where you create a career you love and can be proud of. The global IHP community is filled with some of the most kind and caring people in the world, and we can't wait to welcome you into our world soon. For more information or to set up a discovery call with one of our IHP Health Coach graduates, simply head over to integrativehealthpractitioner.org.